talked a lot lately about kind of wheels, dials, and knobs as far as how to really keep improving the things that we do. And so I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more in depth. So, there's lots of different ways to really work on refining what you do. So if you've got kind of a knob, a dial, and a wheel. So if you got the little things, little bigger things, and big old things. And so what this really comes down to is looking at ways that you can improve things. And so this is really from the standpoint of these are minor improvements. These are incremental improvements. And these are pretty dramatic improvements. And so when we say improvements, where do you think, in our case, where do you think those improvements are going to be?
Efficiency, effectiveness.
Right? They're going to be improvements in effective and efficiency. So what would you say are, when, as more than just effective and efficient, what would be things that would make things more effective? So how do we make things more effective? By increasing value, right? So if we make it more valuable for the customer, how else can we make things more effective?
Streamline processes.
So would that be efficient, potentially?
Yeah, efficient, yeah.
So that'd be increased time savings?
We understand them more, so was that the word you were talking about the other day? They like to be understood.
Okay. So if we're able to provide, at that point, if we understand them better, we're going to be able to do better things for them and increase value. So it could be just that it could be value. It could be things that we're doing better for them because we understand them. It could be time savings. We're increasing time savings. It could also be that we make it more scalable or replicable. So I don't even know if that's a word, but if we can do what we do in less time, if we can do what we do for more people, or we can make it more easily happen, if we're really increasing value, or the other components of effectiveness is just adding. You could be adding things that increase value, or it could be that it's stronger. That it's whatever it is just better. So, those are different things that kind of go along with it. And so when you come up here, different ways of increasing things. So, more or less, this is maybe like a less than 10% improvement. So it's a small thing. Incremental, maybe it's a plus or minus 25%. So it's an incremental improvement that makes things more valuable, stronger, better. So really it's like faster, stronger, better. What is a Kanye song that he ripped off of someone else? And then wheel is really 200% better. So like you're dramatically making a huge difference. And so an example that has made a lot of evolutions over time for us is our brand messaging exercise. So there's been both minor, incremental, and dramatic changes over time. So when we first started it was a 4-hour exercise that had lots of time, a lot of questions that necessarily weren't great questions. So we refined questions over time. So a minor improvement might be that you rephrase a question, or that you remove a question that isn't getting high value because it's both saving time and maybe getting higher value out of the exercise. What would be if reframing or rephrasing a question is a knob change in our brand messaging exercise? What would be a dial change?
The sending of the homework.
Okay.
So we send them a couple questions up front that don't have to be answered on the spot.
So we send homework now ahead of time, so that we can cut out probably 10-15 minutes, which increases our time savings and also allows us to use that time for more specific questions. What else? We've seen a couple dial changes really in the last 3 or 4 exercises we've done. We've had a couple dial changes.
We've started using more whiteboardish type diagrams to let people fill in where they fall.
Okay. So we've added new sections.
Yeah.
We've added and changed. So we've pulled out sections that weren't as impactful and added new sections that we think will be more impactful. So those are kind of dial changes. So that incrementally makes the brand messaging exercise better. What are some potential wheel changes that we're actually in the middle of doing right now?
That would be
Building websites.
What's that?
How we're building websites.
No, within messaging.
Oh.
Previously, it was our cost and time structure. We were doing 4 hours and charging $2,000 for them, and it wasn't valuable for us, it wasn't valuable for them, and now we shrunk it down to 2 hours and increased the cost because the value is there now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been more efficient and effective for both of us.
Okay, what else?
So Brandon had been just doing them on his own, and so like it doesn't really change the exercise per se, but it changes it completely for us if other people can do it.
Because it makes it
because it's
scalable.
and we can then do more at a time. Because if he has to be in all of them, then obviously we can only do one at a time. But if we can do 3 in a day, because other people can do them, then we make however much money that is times 3, and it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, so that's a pretty dramatic wheel shift. If more of the team can get involved in leading the exercises, that's not only going to allow us to do more of them, but now because you guys are more intimately involved, so the people who are working, the go-to creative and the account manager that are working on that client is leading the exercise, you're going to have a different relationship and a different depth of that relationship going forward working with a client, which is going to make, like you said earlier, more understood, and therefore you're going to be able to deliver higher value. So it comes kind of two-sided with having you guys lead exercises, which is why we're kind of leading in that direction, because that's going to make it more scalable, and you're going to have a much better relationship with that client because you're going to be more intimately involved with them. So those are examples of kind of knob, dials, and wheels within messaging. So there's one challenge that happens that a lot of companies fall into, and it's there's a book by I think it's Clay Christensen called The Innovator's Dilemma. And what he talks about in Innovator's Dilemma is essentially that there's a dilemma that innovative companies face over time. Over time, when somebody's really active and really innovative, they're in attack mode. They're focusing on pushing forward. But at some point, success breeds competition, and success brings, instead of being the attacker, you become the defender. And so what ends up happening to a lot of companies is as they achieve success, then they try to protect success instead of furthering it. So this is where you see a lot of bigger companies, once they achieve some certain level of success, they kind of plateau and then kind of fall off. It's that traditional kind of product cycle that kind of, the innovators, disruptors, and so forth and so on. And so what the challenge comes in is from how can you both stay innovative but also productive? Because really it comes down to when you're making these types of minor improvements or even incremental improvements, you're really working on shoring up what you do. Whereas big wheel turns might be just something dramatically different that has a higher upside risk, but also higher risk of failure. So, an easy example on this in play is with Apple with the iPhone. So the iPhone 1, major wheel change, right? Like completely different, blew up the market. iPhone 2, 3, 3S, going from 3 to 3S, 4 to 4S, knob changes, from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5 might be small dial changes, but there's a lot of people saying right now that Samsung with their one phone has maybe even passed them up in a lot of people's opinions. So right now Apple's probably in need of another wheel change with the iPhone to get back out in front of this innovator's dilemma, because right now they've been almost kind of protecting their house. And so there's a quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald that talks about that the sign of first-rate intelligence is to be able to hold two opposing thoughts in your mind at the same time and still be able to function. And so the challenge is, how do you refine, so if you focus on refining, or are you rebuilding? Are you renovating or innovating? Is it an evolution or a revolution? So this is kind of the range from here to here is kind of from here to here. And so the challenge is not, in that concept of having two opposing thoughts at the same time, is not in the or, but in the and. So the challenge then is to be thinking to both refine and rebuild, to both renovate and innovate, to both evolve and revolve. So that's the challenge that we as an innovative company have to maintain, is making sure that we can have both those trains of thoughts going. So it's essentially having kind of your left brain and your right brain about kind of improving what exists and creating what doesn't. And that's the ultimate challenge, is how do you at the same time focus on improving what does exist, but then looking to create what doesn't. And a lot of that comes, we've talked about it in the perspective one, is asking the right questions. So it's, when you're looking to refine, renovate, or create an evolution of what we're working on, it's how can we make this better? How can we provide a little more value for the customer? How can we make it a little better? How can we make this more efficient? How can we do this more repeatably? How can we make this more scalable? Just incremental changes, and looking at how can we make little minor changes right now, today, what we're doing. How can we implement it to the next exercise that we do in the messaging one we talked about. At the same time, be looking for ways of how can we dramatically make this better? How can we dramatically change this to provide more value? So questions that you can frame with that is, how could we do the same thing in half the time? Same value, half the time. Or the other side of that coin is twice the value, same time.
You use the iPhone as an example of a wheel where really Apple, there was nothing before it, right? There was no knob, no dial, it just went right to a wheel. In the 3 years of now goBRANDgo, have you guys ever felt that you've done something like that?
Obviously nothing at that magnitude.
Yeah, obviously.
But really this effective and efficient inside of our market is essentially unheard of. So the way we go, our business model is something that is pretty much, I think, a wheel turn in our industry. The way that we conduct our business, the way that we do open book management, the way that we do what we do, those are all things that really don't exist. The way that we approach, so that kind of trickles down to, how we do our websites, to how we do messaging, to how we do everything that we do. Those are all kind of, because wheel changes can happen at dramatically different percentages also. An industry-changing wheel change might be a 10,000% change, where we might be in the 200 to 400s. So I think our business model as a whole is a wheel change for our industry. But then, like the way we're doing websites now, we talked about time savings. So if these percentages are, the percentage of increased value plus the increased time savings. So the Dare Elite collection, not only are we making stronger, more stable websites, but we're doing it in 3/4 half the time. So that is a wheel change within how we do websites.